are still on how to take a good macro image every single time, and this is the first part in this three-part series, which is all about what makes a good macro image. We've talked about the things that make up a good macro image, like subject, light and focus, composition, and all those other things, and we've given them percentage of just how much we think they make up a good macro image. In today's video, we are going to be talking about background and background control and how it can make or break a good macro image. So let's get into it. If this is your first time stumbling upon my video, my name is David Joseph. I'm a pro macro wildlife photographer based in Nigeria, and I make videos about macro photography, how to get good macro photographs, gears you need for good macro photographs, stories behind it, just literally everything about photography. So if you enjoy content like that, I suggest you subscribe. I'm going to assume I'm not speaking to 5-year-olds, and we all know what a background is in an image. So I'm going to jump right straight into what makes a good background, or how do you know your background is good. And the first thing you can use to tell that your background is good is that, is your background beautiful or appealing? Yes, that is a very good one. We all love beautiful backgrounds, and even as humans, if we want to take pictures, we have to go to places that we consider nice and appropriate for not just ourselves but for the attire we are putting on, or maybe any other concept that we have in mind. So it's the same thing that applies to bugs. If you want to photograph a bug, does that background suit that subject? Is it beautiful? What kind of subject is it? Now the difference is that in bugs we cannot move them, and cannot in quotes, because yeah, some people do move them, but for me, I like taking my pictures in situ. So it can be hard if you're not moving the subject, and you can't like speak to them and tell them, hey, move this way, let's go this way. So how do you get a beautiful background? Don't worry, hold on, I'm going to let you know how to do that. So the first thing you have to look out for is your background beautiful? Is it appealing? And if it checks that box, then yes, that's one. The next thing that lets you know if your background is a good one is your background clean or non-distracting? When I say clean background, I'm not talking about a background without stains, like on a white shirt. I simply mean, does your background not have objects that can be distracting or take away from the intrigue of the shot? That is what I mean by a clean background. Now, sometimes the background doesn't have to be like clean for it to make sense. It just has to be in a very nicely arranged manner, because some of these things are actually what makes up the background and makes the image interesting as a whole. You only have to watch out that it shouldn't be distracting and shouldn't confuse the viewer or make them look away from the subject. It should actually add to the subject. So I guess I've kind of like spilled onto the third one, but I'm still going to move on to the third thing you have to look out for to know if your background is good. Even though these photos are taken in situ, you have to check if the background complements the subject. Does the background add to or take away from this subject's beauty, or how much this subject stands out? Is the subject engulfed in the background, or just like fully put in there and doesn't like be separated or stand out away from the background? This is something you have to look out for, because if the subject and the background are clashing, it doesn't make sense. So you have to pick a background that complements the subject, or at least pick a subject that is in a background that complements it. The last and one of the most important things you can use to tell if your background is good is that your background sets a scene, tells a story, or adds to the story of the subject and the entire image as a whole. For me, I like backgrounds that are just very natural for the subject. Like, it's like stepping into their home. Let's say you hire a photographer and you want them to get a picture of you that shows your personality. You would want to be in your home, of course, and the favorite part of your home, and maybe holding your favorite stuff or doing your favorite thing, stuff like that. That is exactly how I approach subjects in macro photography. What is their story? What makes them unique? And when I say what makes them unique, I'm not talking about the species. Yeah, I'm talking about, yeah, I photographed lots of frogs. So what makes this frog different from the frog I photographed last night, or the frog I photographed earlier this night? That is what I'm looking for. That is what I want to achieve with the shot. So sometimes you have to look for background that tells a story or adds to the story of the subject or the scene, or just set up the entire scene. So that is something you have to look out for. when you're trying to tell if a background is good. And altogether, these 4 things are going to help you know if you have a good background. But what if you don't have a good background? How can you actually effect changes to have a good background without moving your subject? Let's find out. Truth is, a good background doesn't always make itself, and sometimes you have to do that by yourself. And this doesn't involve you altering the background with your own hands or moving the subject away. You see, macro photography is fun when you just don't touch anything. Yes, all you have to do is control your own self and control your camera. And that takes us to the first thing you can do to get a better background. It's to adjust the angle or perspective of the camera. You see, in macro photography, we have just a little area that we are focusing on. So a little bit of shift to the right or to the left. I don't even know if that's my right or left, or up or down. It's going to really do a lot to the image, to the subject, and of course to the background. So that is the first thing you have to do if you really want to, control your own background and get the best out of it. Another thing you can do to get a better background is to include a foreground element. And I know that kind of sounds odd because we are talking about backgrounds. How does foreground element come in? Yes, it does come in because it adds extra layer and depth to the image, and you can also use foreground elements to conceal parts of the background. Yes, it's just that sweet and beautiful. So include a foreground element. And for foreground element, I think you have more control over it than you do over your background. So always play around with foreground elements. Feel free to include it. Feel free to, just play around with it. I guess that's what I already said. No problem. If you shoot macro photography at night like me, a lot of times you are going to get black background. I don't know if there are people that hate it. I think at one point I kind of felt like most of my macro images were all black background and I wanted to change it. But the truth is, no background is better than a bad background. And I think this is subjective. Some people may consider black to be a background, and yeah, I guess it is. It's a background. But overall, black background or no background is better than a bad background, like a poor background or a busy background, a distracting background. So sometimes the best thing you can do is to just take a picture of the subject and let the background be black. It's still going to do the job. So that's the third thing you can do if you want to get the most out of your background. But if blacks are not your thing, well, they're my thing. I mean, I'm even wearing black and I kind of kept the aesthetic of this video dark and kind of blackish where I can. So if black is not your thing and you want to spice it up with colors and get really creative, you can add color cards to your background, and this is going to give you any color that you use. But there are tips for this. You have to actually pick colors that are natural and suit the subject. You have to check your color wheel and either complementary colors or maybe depending on the style you want to go with. So this is more like a glamour photo shoot as Tibo would call it for the insect or for the bug. So you can pick color backgrounds and get creative with it, or even other things that you want to use and get creative. Just make sure you don't touch the subject or like destroy anything, yeah, because I find that to be very, very important. You have to leave the place better than you got there. That's the most fun part of it. And maybe because I think, well, I shouldn't call myself lazy, but if you're a lazy photographer, you like it when you don't even have to do anything concerning the subject or the background. So yeah, that's pretty much it for that. So this is a recording after the initial video recording. So another way to improve your background is that you can also use the subject as its background, especially in images that are tight close-ups. This way you have little or nothing to worry about in the possible actual background because you are not even going to need it. And here are some sample images where I applied this technique. To round this up, I have to say background makes 10% of a good macro image, and we've already had 75% on the table, even though there's no table here. So if you add it together, you now have 85%, and we are left with 15%. And yes, we are going to find out what those are in the next video. So stick around. I mean, you already have 85% of what makes a good macro image, and 85 is great, to be honest. So we only have 15 left, and we'll talk about it. Again, I'm David Joseph at ABCD David, and if you want to support the channel, you can do so by liking, subscribing. I think I almost forgot the drill. And you could as well share the video or donate a coffee. I really appreciate that so much. So thank you so much, and I'll see you again. Bye.